Hi, everyone. Welcome to episode 425 of the All Dolphins podcast for Friday, December 6th, 2024. As you can see, I have the old man glasses on, and maybe there's a reason behind this. We're going to be talking about some old stuff, revisiting some Dolphin history here because we have to, based on the comments made by one Nick Saban on the Pat McAfee show on Friday. And to help me do this and look ahead to the game against the Jets a little bit and also talk coaches in general and Dolphins. Dave Hyde from the South Florida Sun Sentinel. How are you, Dave Hyde?
I'm doing well. I wish I had seen Nick say I turned on the show and then went and did other things, and so I missed his segment there.
It's actually was very interesting for those not aware. They were talking about the NFL. The conversation was about Dan Campbell at first, and we should address Dan Campbell a little bit too for what he's doing with the Detroit Lions, his aggressiveness, and then talking about Ben Johnson potentially being a candidate for the Chicago Bears. And then Pat McAfee wants to turn the conversation to the SEC championship game between Georgia and Texas. And Nick Saban volunteers this. He goes, before we do that, can I say something? So obviously this is something he felt was important for him to say. And he basically proceeded to say that Ben Johnson has to make sure the circumstances are right before you take the job. And that means mainly the roster and also having a quarterback. And then he said, because, well, for me, when I took the Miami job, I didn't have a quarterback. I had no salary cap space. I had no draft picks. This is where he proceeded to change history by saying it was because of the Ricky Williams trade. Not true. Anyway. And then he basically called it a no-win situation. And then AJ Hawk, who is one of the co-hosts, former Green Bay Packers linebacker, says, didn't you know this beforehand? And then Nick Saban proceeds to say, yeah, but I was a dumbass. So, and then basically saying that Wayne Heisinger was such a good owner and he liked the organization, really thought he could turn it around. And 2 years later, after I am not going to be the Alabama coach, which our good friend here, Dave, is very well aware since it was this question who prompted it, left to become the head coach at the University of Alabama.
Yeah, a lot to unpack in our buddy Nick's comment. Actually, you know what? I like covering Nick Saban, and let's start with there's so many. It was such a packed 2 years of things that happened around the Dolphins. But no win situation, that's a little hard to take. I mean, if I remember Jason Taylor said exactly what I thought, which if he had picked Drew Brees, he'd still be the Dolphin coach, and they'd be Brady and Belichick of the Dolphins. And Nick Saban was a great coach. He doesn't need, look at what he's done. Did he make mistakes with the Dolphins? Obviously. But the big mistake was personnel. And that one decision sunk so many coaches in the NFL because it's a partnership. When people say, oh, who's more important, Brady or Belichick? Well, what year are you talking? First year, Brady was nothing and then rode, so it's a partnership. And there's a reason why in the Hall of Fame, coaches and quarterbacks from same teams often go into the Hall of Fame because they got that partnership right. And my point was, look, Saban was a weird guy. I had a lot of ticks, but he's a great coach. And if you just got that one decision right, and again, there's a.
Oh, and we lost Dave's sound over here.
I did so much. If you want to go, take you back in the time machine here. I talked to Wayne Heising at length, not only about hiring Nick Saban, but about the decision for the quarterback because it wasn't, the team doctors said, oh, well, you can't sign Drew Brees. What the team doctor, Dan Cannell, did was he took all the medical records of Brees, sent them to the 6 top shoulder surgeons in the country, and said, and they all came back, according to Heisinger, they all came back with almost the exact same assessment, be 80% chance he's never going to get back to what he was. And it was the reverse for Dante Culpepper's knee.
Yeah.
And so given the odds, what would any of us do in that situation? So, and they got played by the odds. It was just unfortunate for the franchise.
Yeah, well, okay, and there are a couple of layers here. As Randy Mueller appeared on a podcast, I don't know whose podcast it was, a few years back, and he was basically saying the Dolphins kind of had to distance themselves a little bit because Danny Cannell was Wayne Huizinga's doctor, and if he's not the one not clearing him, then it's tough to go against that. Then there was another story coming out that the Dolphins at some point make Drew Brees an offer, but it was after the fact. And by that time, Drew Brees had been turned off a little bit and was getting a lot more love from the Saints. And it was like, okay. But be that as it may, and obviously that's the big faux pas. And this is not even mentioning the fact that Dolphins could have drafted Drew Brees in 2001, except they decided that they needed a zone corner to play man-to-man when they already had Sam Madison and Patrick Surtain.
And a guy who never played man-to-man in college at Wisconsin.
Correct.
Was added to the...
Yes. No, that's...
thinking?
That was a Dave Wanstead pick over, I think it was. I'm trying to remember who it was. Who was
Fletcher.
Tom Bratz. No, Jamar Fletcher was the player picked. I think it was Tom Bratz, who's the director of college scouting, who may have been advocating for...
Wait. Tom Bratz. And I talked to Tom Bratz about this. He said he went in the night before the draft, and he said, Dave, you only get a chance to take a guy like this
there you go.
once in your career. You got to take him. And he said, nope, we're going to go with a defensive player. And Tom Bratz, again, I talked to him. He said he's the coach. He was the guy making the final decision. He wasn't just the coach. He was the head of football operations. All I can do is present what I case. And several people in the organization said Tom Bratz went in there and pounded the table to take Drew Brees.
Yeah. So they had their shots at Drew Brees. It wasn't just in 2006. Here's the other part that I had a major problem with is he blamed never having a quarterback. And I'm not wrong on this, but by all means, feel free to double check me, whoever is watching this podcast. The Dolphins had the second overall pick in 2005 in Nick Saban's first year. They took Ronnie Brown, running back from Auburn, with the second overall pick. Very good player. Second overall pick for a running back. And then there was a guy who went 23 or 24 in the first round that year, played at Cal, named Aaron Rodgers. So not sure you're really in a great position to complain you never had a quarterback when you decided to go ahead and do that.
Well, let's unpack that, because I remember being in that press conference after the draft, and Alex Marvez of the Sun Sentinel asked Saban, did you want to take a running back with a second pick? And Saban said, I did not want to take a running back with the second pick. It was, I still remember the answer, because I was shocked. Here, a coach is admitting, Saban's admitting, I've never heard it before. No, we really didn't want to do that. But what he was saying was there was nobody else in that rating that we could take. And remember, and I've talked to Saban about this years later, he went out and worked out Aaron Rodgers in California and left it. He was quoted. I've looked up the quotes, and he said the same thing, that he really liked Aaron Rodgers. But obviously, look, Aaron Rodgers went 24th.
Yeah.
23rd. I mean, the second pick. Now, what he could have done, maybe traded back. But the point being, Aaron Rodgers had so many teams passed on Aaron Rodgers. He wasn't this clean Hall of Fame quarterback that he became in Green Bay. But again, another miss, and that's the story of the Dolphins of the last 30, 20, 25 years,
Yeah. So, and for those who don't remember, the Dolphins started off 3-7 in Saban's first year, wound up winning their last 6 games that year, went 9-7 with Gus Frerotte at quarterback. He was fine. He certainly wasn't great. The Dolphins decided that wasn't good enough. This is where they were going to make the move the next season, and it came down to Brees and Culpepper. Chose Culpepper, was done after 4 games. It was bad.
Ugly, very ugly.
Yeah. And then it was Cleo Lemon and Joey Harrington actually got the second shot, and they wound up 6-10. And then throughout December, the University of Alabama fired, ironically enough, Mike Shula, creating an opening that everybody had kind of like the sights set. It was Nick Saban, Nick Saban, Nick Saban. And Nick Saban kept denying it. And my man right here, Dave High, was like, can't you just say it? Can't you just say it? And then,
to be honest, I remember thinking he's like tap dancing around the questions, and I was like, just say, if you're staying, just say it. And because my thought was at that time, like an idiot, I thought he was staying until I went out to the room and talked to somebody, and I thought, well, if he's not staying, he's probably not staying. Another funny story from that again, I talked to Wayne Huizenga, and he had dinner with Nick Saban because he had heard all these rumors. And I've heard this from two people, not from Wayne or his wife, but two people unimpeachable. And so Wayne wanted to get the straight story from Nick Saban, and Nick said, come on over for dinner. So Wayne and Marty Huizenga went over to Nick and Miss Terry at their house in Fort Lauderdale, and they walk in, and they're serving beanie weenies. You know, they're serving baked beans and hot dogs, and I love the story. It said, you know, Nick saying, hey, there's no pretense with me. But at the time, Huizenga thought Nick was left. He left the house thinking he was staying. Huizenga did tell me that. And then the next day, his wife, I guess they lived somewhat near each other. His wife was walking around the neighborhood and saw a moving van at the Sabans, and called Wayne and said, you know, he might not be staying after all. So, you know, it's so much comes out after the fact, but, you know, it was an odd time with the Dolphins, but, you know, and Nick Saban, he made the right decision for himself, didn't he? I mean, he went back to college. He did all that he did at Alabama, became the, you know, arguably the best coach in college football when you put it with his resume before the Dolphins too. But it's a shame because he was a great coach in the pros. He just was terrible with dealing with people, and he you know, as a coin flip, you got to get the quarterback right. It's really hard in the NFL.
Yeah, and look, his defense put Jason Taylor in a position to accomplish really good things, and he wound up being named the 2006 NFL Defensive Player of the Year on a team that was 6-10. This was a year where he had a couple of pick sixes, like a bunch of forced fumbles. I think they called it the jack position. So, yeah, the dude could coach X's and O's like nobody's business. Another one of those, not necessarily great in the people department. And in terms of his departure, before we move on to a different topic here, yeah, he's put in a tough spot. But to me, at that point, it's like, just quit. Just resign from the Dolphins instead of, you know, finishing out the season when you basically halfway out the door.
Yeah, it was mishandled, and you know, it was probably, he's done everything well in coaching except leave the Dolphins and Michigan State and LSU. The only one person who left just as poorly as he did for the Dolphins, and yet nobody said anything about it, was Bill Parcells. He just walked out the side door, and you never heard from him again. No one in the organization ever heard from him again. He just, no, in the middle of training camp, I'm out. See ya.
Yeah, but he wasn't the head coach. It wasn't the same.
He wasn't the head coach.
So
he wasn't the head coach. Yeah. He was head of football operations.
Correct. If you look at the Dolphins' head coaching history in terms of awkward or clunky departures, I think, I don't know that there's a close second.
Not a close second.
No, the Don Shula, Jimmy Johnson thing wasn't great either, but that was more like a big picture type of thing where, you know, it was presented very nicely as, you know, Don Shula stepping aside when Wayne Huizenga like really, 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 really wanted Jimmy Johnson.
Yeah, I mean, that was uncomfortable all the way around, and because here's his legend, did so much, and yet it was time for him. It was time, and you know, I talked to Wayne, I talked to Jimmy. You know, I did the book with Jimmy, and both of them have said there was no contact to after Shula left, and so.
Okay. Yeah, but they may have been some sort of, who knows. Okay, moving on to another coach, Dan Campbell, Detroit Lions, former Dolphin head coach. Sorry, former Dolphin interim head coach. Not necessarily surprising, but I mean, for lack of a better term, the man has a gigantic pair of minerals. To quote the guy from the movie Snatch, which is a great movie if you've ever seen it.
I haven't seen it. I don't know that movie. I have to watch it.
Great movie. You have to watch it with subtitles though, because there's some very thick accents. But excellent movie. Dan Campbell always showed fantastic leadership capabilities while he was with the Dolphins. The X's and O's probably was not quite ready. He did some apprenticeship as assistant head coach in New Orleans with Sean Payton, and now we're seeing the results in Detroit. And again, gigantic minerals and some crazy stuff. Don't know how many coaches in the NFL would go for it on 4th and 1 in a tie game with 40 seconds left.
I was sitting there watching the game and saying he's not going to do it. He might be the only coach who would do it, but even he's not going to do that. And it was the smart move, right? Because I was thinking, hey, Jordan Love gets the ball back with 45 seconds left, no timeouts, but they can get 30 yards down the field on this defense. And Campbell said, we're not going to leave it to the defense. And very ballsy move, but here it worked out. It worked out. Obviously the NFC Championship game is the one that didn't work out like that, where he was, I don't know if reckless is the right word, but it's unconventional, his decisions. And yet this is how he's always coached in Detroit. And so, I don't know what to say. No other coach would probably do that. And he did it. It worked out. And he was a lot of fun. He was a lot of fun to be around with the Dolphins. And I remember when he was named interim coach, I asked Harvey Green, hey, can I talk to him for a second? And Harvey asked this, he goes, at the introductory, press conference, or maybe it was a couple of days later. And he said, sure. So after the press conference, he sat down in a chair. I sat down and he talked for an hour to the point Harvey came back. He said, you're still here? And he told such great stories, He comes from a small town. He didn't live in a town in Texas. It's so small. They played 7-on-7 football, and he had to go to a whole different area to get to a high school to play football. Dennis Erickson came and recruited him. And Dennis Erickson comes to watch practice. And this was the era, remember, this was the era before internet, before they didn't even have, I don't think they had color Betamax or whatever that they were sending out on Dan Campbell. And Dennis Erickson comes to practice, and Dan Campbell had worn black sleeves all his games. He wore black sleeves. Dennis Erickson gets there and he goes, where's Dan Campbell? And they go, that's him. And he goes, that white kid? We thought he was black. Dan Campbell, they called him Dan Talica because he used to camp out for Metallica tickets. He has so many stories about him that were so great. It just wasn't his time with the Dolphins.
No, correct. It was a little bit too soon. And again, he would have been, I think he would have been a really, really good hire at the time. And I know I'm not the only one. I don't think as a media member who really was hoping he'd get the job because he was so differently open with us as opposed to coaches who tend to keep a lot of things close to the vest. So we should talk a little bit about this Jets game. The Dolphins should win. There we go. We discussed.
Sure, that's enough. Yeah.
No, as we're doing this, 2:00, the latest word from the Jets camp is Brees Hall is going to be doubtful and Sauce Gardner is going to be doubtful. So
a good game is very doubtful, I would say too. Good game. I would think this is a runaway.
It should be. And if it's not, then, to me, it needs to be a Las Vegas or New England type of game where you win by 2 touchdowns at least. And then we deal with Houston next week. Since we're on the topic of coaches, what would you like to see from Mike McDaniel that maybe you haven't seen so far?
Well, I mean, in this game, or are we talking?
No, over a big picture.
Well, let's the offense. It's got to be a blend of this dink and dunk and some home run balls. You can't just transform everything all of a sudden, and especially when you go against good teams. You try to assemble 10, 12 play drives all the time. They're going to have a player or two who's going to throw somebody for a 10-yard loss or create something where where the bad teams, you can go 8 yards, 4 yards, 6 yards down the field. And so at some point they got to institute, and I wrote a column today about, it was on the internet yesterday, about Tyreek Hill not even being on the field on that 4th down and goal line. They start at the 9-yard line. Malik Washington and Jalen Waller on the field.
Yep.
And they keep it. Waddle's on the field the whole time. And I'm thinking, what's going on here? If the Heat bench Jimmy Butler or name a best player on any team, or you're gonna win or lose, but you got to win or lose with your best players. And what's going on with Tyreek Hill? His numbers are way down, obviously. Now he's not even on the field when the biggest, 4-down series, they're trying to get back into their season really on that series. And so, what do I want? I want their best players to show me something that and the coaches to show that they're the best players too. Or they got big decision to make. If they're not going to use Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle like this, they don't need both of them. At $30 million, so.
I will say this though, because I tend to like to play devil's advocate. So to this side, the idea of why is Tyreek not on the field on those key plays, and the immediate reaction is I completely agree with you. He's your best player on offense. He's got to be out there. And then I think for a second, but wait. Where does Tyreek excel is in stretching the field, and it's more so up and down the field as opposed to side, especially this year. So this is not necessarily the situation where that's most conducive to him being able to make an impact, especially if you're not going to be using like a jet sweep and end around, or have him do something that they've done is like a little sprint out to the corner of the end zone. They've run that quite a bit with some success near the goal line. And certainly there's an argument for the Dolphins to do that.
One thing I meant to do for the column, and I didn't, was look up Tyreek Hill's red zone touchdowns last year. I think he had 5 or 6. Okay. And because I remembered looking it up last year and being shocked that here's this smallish receiver being able to get to create touchdowns. So, I can be corrected right now on that stat, but in my head, it was an interesting number. But again, Jalen Waddle's the same thing. Tyreek Hill's a more physical Jalen Waddle.
Correct.
And so if you're going to have Jalen, I'd rather have Tyreek Hill in that situation. If we're picking one of the other, Malik Washington over Tyreek Hill. I mean, seriously?
That's fair.
I mean, so... again, win or lose, you got to win or lose with your best players. And I'm not paying Tyreek Hill $30 million, even in that situation. And I get, compressed field, all that stuff. I'm not paying him $30 million to watch from the sideline.
No, that's a good point. I wrote this week on Miami Dolphins on SI.com about how the Dolphins are not getting their money's worth at wide receiver, where they're spending more money than any other team in the NFL. And as I made the point that, Tyreek is creating open space underneath for Jonnu Smith and Devon Achane in the passing game, but that's not why you're paying him $31 million. Or you have $31 million cap space devoted to him.
You could have Odell Beckham run deep every play if all you want to do is create space,
Okay. So I don't know if he's got that kind of speed, but okay. Here's the answer to your question here. Tyreek Hill in 2023 had 4 touchdowns of under 10 yards, 4, 2, 7, and 3.
Okay. 4 out of 13 touchdowns were that's a pretty substantial production, I would think. I mean, I'm sure nobody else that was on the field had 4 touchdowns under that last year. Now, this year is a different beast, obviously, with him.
Correct. And it's interesting how last year the Dolphins offense to some was too Tyreek centric. And there was some complaints of like, well, Dolphins need to stop focusing on getting Tyreek his 2,000 yards and all that. And with all due respect, and as good a season as he's having, I'd rather the offense be too Tyreek centric than be too Jonnu centric.
Yeah, it is too Jonnu. I mean, Achane is the playmaker of this offense right now. And Jonnu Smith sort of the cog, the regular, and Waddle and Hill are almost like third and fourth wheels on it. It's very, very odd.
Yep. Okay, so we're going to wrap it up. So we're both in agreement. I haven't done my preview yet in my final score prediction, but if you guys have been paying attention all week, I have a hard time seeing the Dolphins even being threatened in this game. And if they are, it's a really, really bad sign for whatever possibly exists that they could run the table. Dave, you agree?
Completely agree. Yeah, I mean, this is the Jets are probably Saturday afternoon sitting and sipping margaritas poolside. Their season is done, and they know it. And Aaron Rodgers is probably just trying to figure, how do I get out of this mess? And their coach is fired, their GM's fired, their season's in the toilet, and they got an old quarterback. The Dolphins have an old roster. It's almost like it's the geriatric bowl here.
Yeah, and the other part of it too is, like, for example, Cleveland would worry me more. Weather aside, Cleveland would worry me more because I get the feeling Cleveland's going to play hard no matter what. I think the Jets have such a bad vibe around them. They have a quarterback who's, I guess for lack of a better word, aloof or a bit above everything. And I think that kind of permeates.
And not only aloof and above everything, he's done. He's not any good anymore. I mean, that's borne out. It's Tom Brady ruined it for so many people. Oh, you can play to 45. No, that was the unicorn. This is a guy which he's 40 or 41 now. But the point is, it's time. He's not Aaron Rodgers anymore.
No, he just turned 41. No, and there are certain throws he makes still that I watched, like early in the season, especially. I saw the couple when we would fit into really, really tight windows. Receivers would never come up with a tough catch for him. But lately, those throws aren't there. He doesn't move around and escape pressure at all. And Dolphin players and coaches all week, when asked about him, did the right thing, gave him his roses and all that, gave him the big hearts, like he's so great, Hall of Famer and all that. Again, the truth is he's not the same quarterback. It cannot be duplicated. That's my shtick here, the hearts, as Dave tries to do it.
I can't do it.
Okay. I have no idea how to do it either, so it's purely a fluke. On that note, we're going to wrap it up. Dave Hyde, thanks to you as always, my friend.
Good talking to you.
You see the Twitter handle at Dave Hyde Sports. Catch his work at sunsentinel.com. Or if you still buy the old newspapers, it's the South Florida Sun Sentinel. There you go. Catch my written content at Miami Dolphins on SI.com. And we will be back here Saturday if there's news worthy of discussion. If not, we'll be back after the game on Sunday. In the meantime, please like, share, all that good stuff, and enjoy. Thank you.